Greetings, welcome and thank you for clicking on this video. I am BH the Uncivilized and today I'm going to be talking about Inglorious Basterds. And now this will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen this already you may wish to watch that first and then come back to this video afterwards. It's a great film, so definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it. Very historically accurate. If you're studying World War II, you'd want to watch this film and make notes and put everything in the exam. For those who have seen the film, know that you really shouldn't do that at all. But it's a great film, definitely worth checking out nonetheless. Now the main thing I'm going to be talking about in this video is comparisons between characters. So I'm going to start off with Hans Lander and Aldo Rain. Now Lander, when we're introduced to him, he asks Monsieur Lapidite in chapter 1 if he's heard of him, and he had. He also asks if he knows of his nickname, which he does. He then proceeds to explain why he likes his nickname, the unofficial title, the Jew Hunter as the people call him. He says that he's earned it, which is why he likes it so much. Throughout chapter 1, Lander is calm, polite, non-threatening, very courteous. He's a model gentleman, yet Lapidite is visibly nervous around him. Now he said that he'd heard rumours that the Dreyfuses had fled to Spain when asked about if he'd heard anything about the Dreyfuses. But when he was asked point blank if he was hiding enemies of the state after Lander promised to leave his family alone as a reward for his cooperation, he gave them up pretty quickly. I mean, he was upset that he did it, but he did give them up pretty quickly. There was no forcing, so to speak, of Lapidite. Now, after we're introduced to Rain and the Bastards, we are shown a scene where the Bastards are scalping the heads of the Nazis, and Werner is brought over to Rain. Now, Rain asks him if he's heard of Hugo Stieglitz, which he had. He also asks if he's heard of the rest of them, which he then replies, "You are Aldo the Apache," so he refers to him by his nickname. Rain later asks if he knows about what the Bear Jew does, and which he does. He knows that he beats them to death with a bat. Now between Rain and Lander, they both use their reputations to intimidate or try to intimidate others. With Lander, it's solely based around him and what he does. With Rain, it extends to the rest of the Bastards. Rain, however, does threaten Werner, saying that Donowitz would beat him to death if he doesn't give up the German camp. To which Werner defiantly says he declines. Now both Rain and Lander have reputations that precede them, but the difference in outcomes tells us that perhaps Lander's reputation is a lot more menacing. Consider how polite he was to Monsieur Lapidite, that he didn't have to resort to threats to get him to give up the Dreyfuses. Whereas Rain did have to use threat, and Werner still didn't give up the German camp. However, we also need to consider the persons involved. As far as we, the audience, know, Lapidite is just a farmer raising his 3 daughters. We're not led to believe he's had any combat training or interrogation resistance training. Werner, on the other hand, is introduced as Sergeant. So immediately we know at the very least he isn't a regular civilian. And this is how the film separates the good guys from the bad guys. With the exception of killing Bridget von Hammerschmack, we don't see Lander do anything violent. He uses his reputation to get Lapidite to cooperate, but orders the soldiers to do the actual shooting. He points a gun at Shosanna while she's running away, but doesn't actually shoot. And 4 years later, when he is talking to Emmanuelle in the restaurant about using the cinema, she knows who he is. So although he's again very polite and affable, and when he tells her "attendez telegram," it's her knowledge of him that elicits her nervous disposition. Rain, we see, or more specifically, we are aware of him carving swastikas into the foreheads of 2 people and shooting another. But they're all soldiers, more specifically Nazi soldiers. The average audience member can relate to the plight of a farmer, the working man, taking care of his family. We identify with Lapidite, so to intimidate him is to intimidate us. And so we see Lander as the bad guy, although Rain actually commits more in-film atrocities. Alright, now I'm going to bring Friedrich Zoller into the mix. Now I'm comparing Zoller to all of that. When we're introduced to Zoller, he's a very polite young soldier, smitten with the unimpressed Emmanuelle. when he said his name, he stood quietly as if he was waiting for her to make some kind of response to react to it, which she doesn't. His reputation doesn't precede him, at least not as far as Shoshana is concerned. This sets him up to be the doofus or the dweeb of the film. We find out in the next scene that he's a war hero, and his mannerisms then suggest that he is now expecting her to be impressed. His shrug of the shoulders when the general congratulated him on his conquests. He's now expecting her. Surely she must like me now. Surely she must be impressed now by his, what can I do? And she still isn't impressed. She's maybe a little bit intrigued, but she's still not impressed by him. Now, the audience knows why she isn't particularly interested in Zola. Zola does not. He has no idea of the history that happened 4 years ago to her family. At this point, most people, however, would back away. Zola, however, doesn't. He has her escorted to the restaurant to meet Goebbels to discuss moving his film premiere to her cinema without actually asking her if she was interested in having film shown there in the first place. So not only is he a doofus, he's a persistent doofus. And because Shoshana doesn't take him seriously, we don't take him seriously. Unlike Rain and Landa, Zola's reputation isn't known by the person who he wants to know it. And also of note is, as far as we know, Zola hasn't been given a nickname by either his allies or his enemies. Zola wants to be as revered as Rain and Landa, and perhaps in his mind believes that he is. He's had successes, or maybe triumphs would be a better word to use. But his wins didn't get him what he wanted. So at the end, when Shoshana turns him down again at his own movie premiere, this creates his outburst of anger. But notice how quickly his anger simmered when he thought he was finally going to get himself some. But he didn't. He got shot. Because he's a doofus. A persistent, insecure and dangerous doofus, but still a doofus. One of the things I think Tarantino does very well, and perhaps better than anyone that comes to mind, is referencing other films. Inglorious Basterds is no exception to that. But of all the references, what I found the most interesting was its nods to Western all'Italiana, or more commonly known as spaghetti westerns. During the opening scene with Monsieur Lapidite working on the farm, we have an Ennio Morricone inspired version of Pure Elise playing as non-diegetic music as Landa is approaching. A slow build up to the climatic shooting, which is what Sergio Leone did a lot of. Also, the close-ups of Lapidite is something that Leone used a lot of as well. In fact, the first chapter is called Once Upon a Time in Nazi-occupied France, a reference to Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. Now, these references play out throughout the film. For example, when approaching Rain in slow motion with the Morricone-inspired music playing, the introduction of Donny Donowitz, the beer Jew, tapping on the tunnel wall, that slow build-up to the climatic beating. But maybe one of the more subtle references was to The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, or in this case, The Good, the Bad and the Doofus. In The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, Tuco Benedicto Pacifico Juan Maria Ramirez's nickname was The Rat. In Inglorious Basterds, Lapidite agrees with Landa that if a rat was to come to his house, he'd probably greet it with hostility. Now let's consider how Shoshana greeted Zola. At first, he was being nice. She doesn't respond in kind. He asks her for her name and she says, "Vous voulez voir mes papiers?" So although he didn't have a nickname, he was treated like a rat, probably because he's a doofus. And that is what I think of Inglorious Basterds. Let me know if you agree or if you disagree, or if you think there's something that I've missed. If you liked this video, then show the like and share button some love. If you haven't already, then make sure you subscribe for more and check out some of the other videos on the channel as well. But that is all for now, so thank you for watching, and until next time, if this is it, old boy, then I hope you don't mind me going out speaking to kings.